Michael Knowles is ontologically evil.
Banning books is very American.
Personally, as an American, I love freedom. I love people's freedom to discuss ideas in the free marketplace of ideas. I love people's freedom to write about ideas in the free marketplace of ideas. I think that in open debate and conversation is quite the American freedom. So please demonstrate to me why it is American to ban books.
Banning drag shows is obviously very American. For much of American history throughout the country, including in San Francisco, transvestitism was completely illegal. You would be arrested. Public disturbance.
So the argument is that banning drag and or banning trans people, very American because that like used to be on the law book. That's a pretty crazy argument. You know, we can go through the history of America as a country. There was a lot of like really terrible stuff on the law book. If that's what makes something American, then like slavery is very American. Jim Crow laws, segregation would be very American. Conversion therapy for gay people would be very American. There's a lot of horrible stuff that we used to do. Hopefully, what would actually be considered American is learning from our mistakes and trying to give people freedom in order to live their lives as they please, so long as they're not harming anybody else, rather than going back to a very dark time in our past. We had archaic laws that were quite frankly barbaric.
All sorts of weird sexual behaviors were illegal in the United States until the Supreme Court invented some right to do weird sex stuff in the mid-2000s, okay?
Dude, who wants to live in a country where you're not allowed to do weird sex stuff? What kind of American would be like, you know, anal sex makes me uncomfortable, therefore I don't think that any American should be allowed to have anal sex. Come on, what's wrong with you? It is somebody's American freedom to get railed in the ass if they want to. I am a freedom-loving American, and if I want to do weird sex stuff, who are you to take my freedom to life, liberty, and the pursuit of high-speed rail away from me?
It is deeply, deeply American to proscribe this sort of weird behavior. But even banning books has always, for all of American history, has been very, very much a part of American public life.
Okay, so his argument literally is that we used to have laws which banned books, therefore it's very American. Michael Knowles' logic literally would dictate that slavery, white supremacy in every form would be very American. Really interesting how when it comes to things like trans people, gay people, banning books, they're always like, oh, we appeal to the past. That's so very American to be transphobic. But yet, like, whenever you try to say something like America was founded on white supremacy, which is a factually true statement, conservatives immediately dodge and are like, no, white people born today don't have to, you know, do anything to make up for the lasting repercussions of slavery, of Jim Crow, of segregation. They really want to have it both ways. They want to defend their current day transphobia by saying transphobia used to be a thing in the past, but like they don't want to acknowledge racist policies of the past and how those have had a lasting impact on today.
Going back to the Puritans, they banned all sorts of books. In fact, there was one guy ostracized from the colony by Governor Bradford for writing poems that were a little bit licentious, a little bit lascivious. And they almost executed him for it, but then they just banished him to an island so he could wait for an English ship to come by and take him back.
Is that the America that anybody wants to live in? Like, seriously, if you want to write some funky smut, should you be executed for that? Should you be sent out of the freaking country? Like, that's kind of the argument he's making here. It's like, oh, it's so American because people used to be, like, executed or exercised from the country just for, like, writing some smut. Like, who wants to be subject to that amount of surveillance, to that amount of authoritarian government control because, like, some smut gives somebody, like, a tummy ache? Just get over your freaking tummy ache and let people have their own freedom, right?
In fact, these laws against obscenity were being exercised at the federal level as recently as 2008.
Another fun point, if we're going to have, like, obscenity laws, how are you going to, like, consistently enforce that? At what point does something become smut? It's like the debate between when is something art versus porn. Like, if you're trying to enact some kind of law in order to ban pornography, the line between art and porn is very blurry. And if you're going to try to, you know, draw the line between writing which is puritanical versus writing which is smut, that's also going to be a very blurry line. Who is supposed to enforce this? Are we supposed to have, like, a jury decide your fate as to whether or not you wrote smut and you need to go to jail? Like, what kind of authoritarian bullshit is this?
The guy was in prison until 2011, one of the pornographers that they threw in jail. But furthermore, it's not just the Christians and the conservatives banning books, quite the opposite. It's the libs. Since the middle of the 20th century, it's the libs who say you can't teach the Bible in schools.
Does he think that separation of church and state is the same thing as, like, banning books? Okay, he's actually making that argument. Okay, so let's talk about the difference. So first off, the First Amendment of the American Constitution states that there is going to be a separation of church and state, as in the state does not have any control over the church, and the church does not have any control of the state. Therefore, mandating religious teaching in school would be giving the state domain over the church. And this has problems beyond just, enforcing a religion over the people. This is a little known fact, but the founding fathers, when they argued for the separation of church and state, they were overwhelmingly very religious. The reason why they wanted the separation of church and state is because they didn't want the government to have control over the church. When we think about like the Anglican Church or the Catholic Church, the settlers of the colonies really didn't like how a pope or a king could dictate what religious doctrine was canon. If you don't have a separation of church and state, and you live in a theocracy, the government now decides what is canon in your religion. Do you want to give the government power to play God in that way? That was actually the reason why the separation of church and state was a thing. And if you're going to teach the Bible in schools, now you're giving the government the choice to teach which parts of the Bible, what values to teach from the Bible. The government would be inserting its own doctrine into people's lives and having control over the religion. If you're a religious person, you should want a separation of church and state. Protect your religion from the government. I don't think that people on the left want Bibles like banned from school libraries. If a student wants to read the Bible, I think that they should be allowed to do that. But it's the right that wants to take books away from the library. As in, like, if you want to read a book that has like a queer character, the conservatives want that to not even be on the shelves. Meanwhile, I'm okay with like a Bible existing on a shelf, and if somebody voluntarily wants to pick it up and read it, or they're interested, that's okay. But to enforce that nobody can read a book about a queer person, that's the authoritarian measure, and that's the huge difference.
Oh no, we better not find any teachers with a Bible in school. We're going to get the ACLU on your back. That's right, the American Civil
That's not happening.
Liberties Union. We're going to go after you for having a Bible in school.
No, like literally, you can be a teacher who practices your own faith. You can even own a Bible. Like, that's not a violation of the separation of church and state in any way. Your own interpersonal belief and your ownership of a Bible is not a violation of that.
You better not recite any prayers in schools. Oh, no, sirree.
I think it really depends on what inciting a prayer involves. If by like inciting a prayer, you mean like praying to your God privately at lunch or after school or at like a voluntarily out of school club, I don't think there's anything wrong with that. But if it's something where you're like forcing kids to participate in, which might go against their own religion, yeah, that's absolutely overstepping your boundaries as a state officer.
This is America, one nation under God. We're not going to let you teach the Bible in schools. If you don't want your kid reading gay porn in the library, then politely ask the librarian. Now, what are you talking about? We've got laws against this for all of our nation's history, and furthermore.
Okay, Michael. But your only argument against like why a kid shouldn't be able to read gay porn in school is that we used to have laws that made it illegal? Is that like, that's really your only argument? That's freaking crazy. I mean, we used to have laws that would have made anal sex illegal, but I think that people should be allowed to have anal sex. Like, that's a really shitty argument. If you want to talk about like the merit of sexual education, you can actually make arguments there, but he's not even going to make the argument about like the merit of like sexual education. And by the way, when he says gay porn, what he's referring to is like novellas that have like a gay character, and it might discuss intimacy, which by the way, straight books all the time discuss intimacy. Even things that people like are required to read for school. Romeo and Juliet, if it was like Romeo and Ronald, I mean, conservatives would be calling that gay porn.
How dare you infringe on my right to make my kid read gay porn when he's 10 years old? You don't have...
Nobody is forcing kids to read gay porn. Where is that happening?
Who sets the civil rights and wrongs? Well, that would be the people in a self-government, and that democracy that you people are always prattling on about, even though you don't believe it at all. All of which is to say, the liberals obviously don't care about any of this.
I care about people being allowed to read the books they want because I care about freedom.
They're just going to wrap themselves in the flag to peddle their radicalism.
What does that mean? Wait, what? He's saying that I don't actually care about books being allowed or banned in schools. I just want to wrap myself in like a trans flag or a Black Lives Matter flag. He's shit at narrativizing. Like, that's not even a narrative that like makes any sense at all.
And it's a political lesson for conservatives. The libs, when they're being really, really effective, they're not burning the American flag. The libs, when they're being really effective, they just are lying about American history. And they're saying, oh no, my view, my weird trans throuple parading gay porn down the hallways of elementary schools, why that's as American as apple pie. That's why the founding fathers fought the revolution.
So wait, can you like give the argument as to why it's wrong for like a like why it's not a trans person's freedom to exist? Let's dismiss the point about like distributing gay porn to elementary schoolers because that's not happening. How is it not a trans throuple's American freedom to live their trans throuple life? How is that not their freedom? Life, liberty, the pursuit of
A
happiness.
lesson from Machiavelli. They're picking up a lesson from a lot of political thinkers.
Chat, do you think that Michael is even going to present an argument or not? I'm leaning in, I don't think he's even going to present an argument. So far, his only argument has been things used to be banned. The law used to be different. I literally don't think he's going to present the argument being trans is anti-American.
Which is, if you want to be politically effective, you got to wrap yourself in the flag. So there's two ways to do it. You can either do it in the pure will kind of politics, which is some people see things that are and say why I dream things that never were and say why not, which is the Humpty Dumpty kind of politics in Alice in Wonderland, where Humpty Dumpty says, what does a word mean? It means whatever I say it means. And Alice says, well, it's got to be awfully confusing. The question is, do words really mean those things? And Humpty Dumpty says, no, the question is, which is to be master? That's all.
What the fuck is he saying?
That's the liberal version of it. It's just, we'll just, whatever we say, that's going to become the truth because we said it.
I don't even get it. Like is his whole point that his own words don't make sense, and he says, look, those words I just said that don't make sense, that's liberalism. So should I just say like, the earth is flat, and that's conservatism? Conservatives just think the earth is flat. Like how, like that's literally equivalent to his argument.
Then there's the conservative version, which is...
Conservatism is when I think that whatever used to be illegal is what should be legal. So therefore conservatism is being pro-slavery. Like that actually makes more coherent sense than what he's saying, using his own logic.
And maybe the inherited wisdom of the ages, and maybe just looking at the customs of people.
The inherited wisdom of the ages. Oh my gosh. It's so funny how selectively they apply the quote-unquote wisdom of the ages. I'm gonna give you the secret. When conservatives appeal to the wisdom of the ages, which by the way is a logical fallacy, like the appeal to tradition, they only appeal to the wisdom they already agree with. That's why they say, well, trans people used to not be allowed to exist, therefore they shouldn't be allowed to exist. But in most cases, say for maybe like Kelly, for example, they'll say, well, you know, slavery was bad. Actually, it's pretty hard for them to say that slavery was bad. They have to come up with so many, like, it's generally really hard for them to say that, but they're not going to use that argument for like slavery.
Right now, text Knowles, K-N-W-L-E.
No, I don't want your advertisement. Oh my god.
We're making an argument that really has a basis in history.
The argument has to be like a basis in history. So you just pick something that was historical, and that's when you do conservatism. His logic literally can follow that conservatism is when I say bring back slavery because slavery used to be a truth of the past. That literally follows from the logic of his argument.
Liberal campaign on education in the last 5 or 6 years was the New York Times 1619 Project, which claimed that America's revolution was fought to preserve slavery, and even left-wing academic historians said that wasn't true. And when the writer of the 1619 Project, Nicole Hannah-Jones, was confronted by this, she basically shrugged her shoulders. Yeah, okay, whatever.
I mean, slavery was absolutely a pretty big factor in like the founding of America as a nation. I don't think that her claim was that it was like the only factor in founding America as a nation. America as a country was absolutely built off the backs of slave labor. It's so crazy. Like he's bringing up the slavery topic when just a sentence ago he said, conservatism is when I take something from the past and I support it today. He's bringing up the case that shoots him in the foot. Is his audience like really, like literally too oblivious to realize?
And what did the New York Times do? Eventually they kind of were forced to correct it a little bit subtly many months later, but they still continued to peddle the 1619 Project because they don't care. Politics grounded in the truth or a politics that is pure will.
The New York Times issued a correction. That sounds like they're trying to ground themselves in the truth. If there was like some claims that were inaccurate or some claims that were perhaps hyperbolic or overconstrued, yet they go back to correct them, that sounds like they're interested in truth. Like he's defeating his own argument.
RFK Jr. is running for president now as a Democrat, and RFK Jr. is a lifelong Democrat. Obviously, his father is Robert Kennedy, his uncle's John F. Kennedy, and he's a lib. He's a real lib. But he's gotten a lot of conservative cred recently because he's questioned vaccines for a long time. And vaccine skepticism is now conservative. It used to be liberal, now it's conservative.
Since when was vaccine skepticism a liberal thing? After saying that conservatism is grounded in the truth, now saying that vaccine skepticism is like a hallmark of conservatism? Science denialism is grounded in truth? What?
He questions Big Pharma, questions Dr. Fauci, and so he's done a lot of great work over the last few years. RFK Jr. running against Biden, and a lot of conservatives are saying, why is he running as a Democrat? He should be running as a Republican. He's a Republican these days. The Kennedys are Republicans these days. Here's what RFK Jr. just had to say on the campaign.
Life is the water for democracy, and you know.
Dude sounds worse than Biden. I mean, I know that Sleepy Joe is not the most charismatic, but like, I mean, this guy would lose to Biden on the charisma battle alone.
There is no time in history where the people who were censoring speech were the good guys. That is the first and last step of totalitarianism.
All right, let's see Michael Knowles argue against the point that censoring free speech is what authoritarian bad guys do.
It's the sort of statement that sounds like it's true, but it isn't really true. Throughout history, everyone ever in power at all has censored speech.
Everyone in power at all? I mean, there were definitely like, at least like early human cultures where free speech was pretty normalized, especially like communal societies. What about like the great debate halls of like Athens, Greece? I don't think you can make the claim ubiquitously.
I don't care how liberal you think you are. you would support some kinds of limits on speech. This is throughout all of history. Sometimes the Catholics have censored speech. Sometimes the Protestants have censored speech. Sometimes the Jews have censored speech. Sometimes the Muslims have censored speech.
Can you give like the examples and like justify when speech become like censoring speech becomes justified? Is he gonna take the argument that like because it's bad to yell fire in a movie theater and that should be illegal, that it's okay for me to want to ban books that have like gay characters in them?
Today we see the atheists especially censoring speech.
In what way are atheists trying to censor free speech? I genuinely want to hear him give an example.
The Democrats, sometimes it's been the Republicans. And the reason for that, as I explain in my book, Speechless, Controlling Words, Controlling Minds, #1 national bestseller. Hello. Culture has to have certain limits. Every culture is going to recognize certain things as taboo.
Taboo versus censorship are very different. Like, it can certainly be taboo for a certain practice to exist in a culture. Like the difference between, like, say a culture that, like, in general might be kind of, like, homophobic or have, like, anti-gay tendencies versus a culture that says you're not even allowed to discuss the existence of gay people and we will excommunicate you or stone you if you talk about gay people. Like, there's a difference between taboo and censorship. Like, if the argument's that everybody has, like, taboos or, like, dislikes, sure, but that's not the same thing as censorship. Is Michael even going to present an argument for when we should censor speech or not? I don't think he is at this point.
But it's not wrong necessarily to censor false, evil, ugly speech. It's not wrong to censor drag queen expression in the elementary schools, is it? It's not wrong to censor the gay porn in the elementary school libraries. I think all of us would agree that that's a very good thing.
So his argument is that if it's false, evil, or ugly, then you can censor speech. That's gonna get pretty dicey real quick, especially given how subjectively loaded evil and ugly are. Evil would just mean things that I disagree with. So, for example, if I say that Michael Knowles is ontologically evil because he believes in eradicating trans people's right to exist as freely as they are, then by Michael Knowles' own logic, I should be allowed to censor Michael Knowles. I mean, we could have a real argument about, like, at what point something becomes so harmful that there should be laws in place to stop people from saying things, like yelling fire in a movie theater or, like, making threats at the airport. Like, there can actually be a nuanced conversation there, but he's not even going to engage with that. His argument literally boils down to, I should be able to censor the thing that I don't like because I don't like it. Michael Knowles is ontologically evil